Chapter 1 The Doomed Ship 15 minutes to zero time. The Atlas waited to take off. The sleek, burnished lines of the spaceship glittered in the bright Earthlight that filled the moon's night sky. Its blunt prow pointed upward in empty space. Vacuum surrounded it, and the dead pumice of the moon's surface was under it. The number of its crew was 0. There wasn't a living person aboard. Dr. Hector Conway, Chief Counselor of Science, said, "What time is it, Gus?" He felt uncomfortable in the moon offices of the Council. On Earth he had been at the very top of the stone and steel needle they called Science Tower. He would have been able to look out the window toward International City. Here on the moon they did their best. The offices had mock windows with brilliantly designed Earth scenes behind them. They were colored naturally, and lights within them brightened and softened during the day, simulating morning, noon, and evening. During the sleep periods, they even shone a dim, dark blue. It wasn't enough, though, for an Earthman like Conway. He knew that if he broke through the glass of the windows there would only be painted miniatures before his eyes, and if he got behind that, then there would be just another room, or maybe the solid rock of the moon. Dr. Augustus Henry, whom Conway had addressed, looked at his wrist. He said, between puffs of his pipe, "There's still 15 minutes. There's no point in worrying it. The Atlas is in perfect shape. I checked it myself yesterday." "I know that." Conway's hair was pure white and looked older than the lank, thin-faced Henry, though they were about the same age. He said, "It's Lucky I'm worried about." "Lucky?" Conway smiled sheepishly. "Catching the habit, I'm afraid. I'm talking about David Starr. It's just that everyone calls him Lucky these days. Haven't you heard it?" "Lucky Starr, eh? The name suits him. What about him? This is all his idea, after all." "Exactly. It's the sort of idea he gets. I think he'll tackle the Sirian Consulate on the moon next." "I wish he would." "Don't joke. Sometimes I think you encourage him in his idea that he ought to do everything as a one-man job. It's why I came here to the moon, to keep an eye on him, not to watch the ship." "Oh, well, I can't follow him. If that's what you came here for, Hector, you're not on the job." "Oh, well, I can't follow him about like a mother hen. But Bigman was with him. I told the little fellow I would skin him alive if Lucky decided to invade the Sirian Consulate single-handed." Henry laughed. "I tell you he'll do it," grumbled Conway. "What's worse, he'd get away with it, of course." "Well, then." "Just encourage him, and then some day he'll take one risk too many, and he's too valuable a man to lose." John Bigman Jones teetered across the packed clay flooring, carrying his stein of beer with the utmost care. They didn't extend the pseudo-gravity fields outside the city itself, so that out here at the spaceport you had to do the best you could under the moon's own gravity field. Fortunately, John Bigman Jones had been born and bred on Mars, where the gravity was only 2/5 normal anyway, so it wasn't too bad. Right now he weighed 20 pounds. On Mars he would have weighed 50. Watching him with amused eyes. The sentry was dressed in the uniform of the Lunar National Guard, and he was used to the gravity. John Bigman Jones said, "Hey, don't stand there so gloomy like. I brought you a beer. Have it on me." The sentry looked surprised, and said regretfully, "I can't, not while I'm on duty, you know." "Oh, well, I guess I can handle it myself, I guess. I'm John Bigman Jones, college big man." He only came up to the sentry's chin, and the sentry wasn't particularly tall, but Bigman held out his hand as though he were reaching down with it. "I'm Bert Wilson. You from Mars?" The sentry looked at Bigman's scarlet and vermilion hip boots. Nobody but a Martian farm boy would let himself be caught dead in space with them. Bigman looked down at them proudly. "You bet. I'm stuck here for about a week. Great space. What a rock the moon is. Don't any of you guys ever go out on the surface?" "Sometimes, when we have to. There isn't much to see there." I sure wish I could go. I hate being cooped up. There's a surface lock back there. Bigman followed the thumb that had been jerked back across the sergeant's shoulder. The corridor, rather poorly lit at this distance from Luna City, narrowed into a recess in the wall. Bigman said, "I don't have a suit." "You couldn't go out even if you had one. No one's allowed to go out without a special pass for a while." "How come?" Wilson yawned. "They've got a ship out there that's getting set to go." He looked at his watch. "In about 12 minutes. Maybe the heat will be off after it's gone. I don't know the story on it." The sentry rocked down on the balls of his feet and watched the last of the beer drain down Bigman's throat. He said, "Say, did you get that beer at Patsy's Port Bar? Is it crowded?" "It's empty. Listen, I'll tell you what. It'll take you 15 seconds to get in there and have one. I've got nothing to do. I'll stay right here and make sure nothing happens while you're gone." Wilson looked longingly in the direction of the port bar. "I'd better not." "It's up to you." Neither one of them, apparently, was conscious of the figure that drifted past them behind the corridor and into the recess where the space lock's huge door barred the way to the surface. Wilson's feet took him a few steps toward the bar, as though they were dragging the rest of him. Then he said, "Nah, I'd better not." 10 minutes to 0 time. It had been Lucky Starr's idea. He had been in Conway's home office the day the news arrived that the TSS Waltham Zachary had been gutted by pirates. Its cargo gone, its officers frozen corpses in space, and most of the men captives. The ship itself had put up a pitifully futile fight, and had been too damaged to be worth the pirates' salvage. They had taken everything movable through the instruments, of course, and even the motors. Lucky said, "It's the asteroid belt that's the enemy. 100,000 rocks." "More than that." Conway spat out his cigarette. "What can we do? Ever since the terrestrial empire's been a going concern, the asteroid's been more than we can handle. A dozen times we've gone in there to clean out nests of them, and each time we've left enough to breed the troubles again. 25 years ago, and—" The white-haired scientist stopped short. 25 years ago, Lucky's parents had been killed in space, and he, himself, a little boy, had been cast adrift. Lucky's calm brown eyes showed no emotion. He said, "The trouble is we don't even know where all the asteroids are." "Naturally not. It would take 100 ships 100 years to get the necessary information for the sizable asteroids, and even then the pull of Jupiter would be forever changing asteroidal orbits here and there." "We might still try. If we sent out one ship, the pirates might not know it was an impossible job, and fear the consequences of a real mapping. If word got out that we had started a mapping survey, the ship would be attacked. And then what? Suppose we shot out an automatic ship, completely equipped but with no human personnel. It would be an expensive thing to do. It might be worth it. Suppose we equipped it with lifeboats automatically designed to leave the ship when its instruments recorded the energy pattern of an approaching hyperatomic motor. What do you suppose the pirates would do? Shoot the lifeboats into metal drift, board the ship, and take it to their base. Or one of their bases. Right. And if they see the lifeboats trying to get away, they wouldn't be surprised at finding no crew aboard. After all, it would be an unarmed survey ship. You wouldn't expect the crew to attempt resistance." "Well, what are you getting at?" "Suppose further that the ship is wired to explode once its temperature is raised to more than 20 degrees absolute, as it certainly would if it was brought into an asteroid hangar." "You're proposing a booby trap, then?" "A gigantic one. It would blow an asteroid apart, and might destroy dozens of pirate ships. Furthermore, the observatories at Ceres, Vesta, Juno, or Pallas might pick up the flash. Then, if we could locate surviving pirates, we might get information that would be very useful indeed." "I see." And so they started work on the Atlas. The shadowy figure in the recess leading to the moon's surface worked with sure quickness. The sealed controls of the airlock gave under the needle beam of the micro-heat gun. The shielding metal disc swung open. Busy black-gloved fingers flew for a moment. Then the disk was replaced and fused tightly back by a wider and cooler beam from the same heat gun. The cave door of the lock yawned. The alarm that rang routinely whenever it did so was silent this time, its circuits behind the tampered disk disarranged. The figure entered the lock and the door closed behind him. Before he opened the surface door that faced out into the vacuum, he unrolled the pliant plastic he carried under his arm. He scrambled into it, the material covering him wholly and clinging to him, broken only by a strip of clear silicone plastic across his eyes. A small cylinder of liquid oxygen was clamped to a short hose that led to the headpiece that was hooked onto the belt. It was a semi-space suit, designed for a quick trip across an airless surface, not guaranteed to be serviceable for stretches of more than half an hour. Bert Wilson, startled, swiveled his head. "Did you hear that?" Bigman gaped at the sentry. "I didn't hear anything." "I could swear it was a locked door closing. There isn't any alarm, though." "Is there supposed to be?" "Sure, you've got to know when one door's open. It's a bell where there's air and a light where there isn't. Otherwise someone's liable to open the other door and blow all the air out of a ship or corridor." "All right. If there's no alarm, there's nothing to worry about." "I'm not so sure." With flat leaps, each one covering 20 feet in the moon's baby gravity, the sentry passed up the corridor to the airlock recess. He stopped at a wall panel on the way and activated 3 separate banks of ceiling fluorescos, turning the area into a noonday of light. Bigman followed, leaping clumsily and in perpetual danger of overbalancing into a slow nose landing. Wilson had his blaster out. He inspected the door, then turned to look up the corridor again. "Are you sure you didn't hear anything?" "Nothing," said Bigman. "Of course, I wasn't listening." 5 minutes to 0 time. Pumice kicked up as the space-suited figure moved slow motion toward the Atlas. The spaceship glittered in the Earthlight, but on the moon's airless surface the light did not carry even an inch into the shadow of the ridge that hemmed in the port. In 3 long leaps, the figure moved across the lighted portion and into the pitchy shadow of the ship itself. He moved up the ladder, hand over hand, flinging himself into an upward drift that carried him 10 rungs at a time. He came to the ship's airlock. One moment at the controls and it yawned open and closed. The Atlas had a passenger. 1 passenger. The sentry stood before the corridor airlock and considered its appearance dubiously. Bigman was rattling on. He said, "I've been here nearly a week. I was supposed to follow my sidekick around and make sure it doesn't get in any trouble, but how's that for a space wrangler like me? Haven't had a chance to get away." The English secretary said, "Give it a rest, friend. Look, you're a nice kid and all that, but let's have it some other time." For a moment he stared at the control seal. "That's funny," he said. Bigman swelled ominously. His little face had reddened. He seized the sentry by the elbow and swung him about, almost overbalancing himself as he did so. "Hey, bud, you're calling a kid. Look, go away." "Just a minute, let's get something straight. Don't think I let myself get pushed around because I'm not as tall as the next fellow. Put 'em up, go ahead. Get your fist up, or I'll splatter your nose all over your face." He was sparring and slipping about. Wilson looked at him with astonishment. "What's gotten into you? Stop being foolish." "Scared?" "I can't fight you on duty. Besides, I didn't mean to hurt your feelings. I've just got a job to do and I haven't got any time for you." Bigman lowered his fists. "Hey, I guess that ship's taken off." There was no sound, of course, since sound would not travel through a vacuum, but the ground under their feet vibrated softly in response to the hammer blows of a rocket exhaust lifting a ship off a planet. "That's it, all right." Wilson's forehead creased. "Guess there's no use making a report. It's too late anyway." He had forgotten about the control seal. 0 time! The ceramic-lined exhaust pit yawned under the Atlas, and the main rockets blasted their fury into it. Slowly and majestically, the ship lifted and moved upward ponderously. Its speed increased. It pierced the black sky, shrinking until it was only a star among stars. And then it was gone. Dr. Henry looked at his watch for the 5th time and said, "Well, it's gone now. Must be gone now." He pointed with the stem of his pipe to the dial. Conway said, "Let's check with the port authorities." 5 seconds later they were looking at the empty spaceport on the view screen. The exhaust pit was still open. Even in the near ultimate frigidity of the moon's dark side it was still steaming. Conway shook his head. It was a beautiful ship. Still is. I think of it in the past. In a few days it'll be a rain of molten metal. It's a doomed ship. Let's hope that there's a pirate base somewhere that's also doomed. Henry nodded somberly. They both turned as the door opened. It was only Bigman. He broke into a grin. "Oh, boy, it sure was nice coming to Luna City. You could feel the pounds going back on with each step you took." He stamped his feet and hopped 2 or 3 times. "See," he said, "you try that out where I was and you hit the ceiling and look like a big fool." Conway frowned. "Where's Lucky?" Bigman said. "I know where he is. I know where he is every minute. Say, the Atlas is just taking off." "I know that," said Conway. "And where is Lucky?" "On the Atlas, of course. Where do you think he'd be?" And this ends this chapter. I hope you've all enjoyed it. Have a good Saturday. Bye!